Our two speakers are actually sort of in the wrong countries. Midori Komachi is in London at the moment, and Nick Luscombe happens to be in Okinawa, and I'll just briefly introduce the two of them. Midori Komachi is a violinist and composer. As a solo violinist, she's performed extensively throughout Europe and Japan. But she started branching out in recent years. She's published books, and she's an adjunct lecturer at Queen's University in Canada. And she's also been working with Nick Luscombe, our other speaker, who runs MSCTY, on creating sound installations. And beyond that, I'll let the two of them explain it themselves in a minute. But moving on to Nick. So Nick Luscombe is a British DJ, broadcaster, and sound artist. So he is the founder of MSCTY, or should I pronounce it Musicity? I'm not entirely sure. Again, all will be explained. He presented the BBC Radio 3 Late Junction show for 10 years and has done a lot of work in Japan on Japanese soundscapes specifically. And he produced the BBC Radio 3 Sounds of Japan and sound design series, and has also produced documentaries about Japanese architect Kengo Kuma and the musician Ryuichi Sakamoto. So I will leave my introduction at that. This is the timeline. So we can run on if there are enough questions until about 1:15, but we'll definitely close it at that point.
Hello, everyone, and thank you to the Daiwa Anglo-Japanese Foundation for hosting this talk today, and of course to everybody for joining us. I would like to first start by sharing our slide. Hope you can see my slide. So today we'd like to talk about our project, Chashitsu Auditory Tea Room, which will be launched in October with an album and a live concert at the Royal Albert Hall. And we'd like to briefly begin by talking a bit about our background. So as Jason has already kindly introduced, I'm a violinist and composer based in London with a particular interest in Japanese and British music. And as a composer, my work often explores Japanese traditions in dialogue with Western practices, as well as surround sound design in sound installations and experiences. And some of my recent works include composing sound installations for Bamboo Ring by Kengo Kuma with collaborations with Musicity, as well as most recently, the Japan Pavilion at the London Design Biennale, Paper Clouds, designed by Sekisui House Kuma Lab. And my current PhD research at Goldsmiths, exploring the sonic concept of spatial timbre, which was first introduced at the Osaka World Expo in 1970, has taken me to this year's World Expo, which is currently happening in Osaka, where I worked for the UK Pavilion as a music and audio content editor. Some of you may know me more as a classical violinist, with my specialism in performing works by British composers such as Imogen Holst and Delius and Vaughan Williams, as well as my publications on Delius and Vaughan Williams in Japan. And through all of these strands of work, I'm very much passionate about bridging Japan and UK through music and discovering unfamiliar sounds and creating new experiences. And over to you, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, before I introduce myself, I should just say probably how we kind of met, and we met through Daiwa, happily enough. So I came to performance by Midori quite a few years ago now, and then did an interview for my radio show and realized that actually there was so many crossover interests in both our worlds of music between Japan and the UK, but also, you know, architecture, world expos, that kind of thing. So we're going to be talking about something that's kind of been a long time coming, actually, you know, probably like 5 years of discussions and work. So yeah, Jason gave me a great introduction, so I don't need to say too much, but yeah, my background is as a BBC radio presenter and producer, making radio shows. If I could go to the next slide, that'd be great. Thank you. On the next slide, yeah, this is kind of some of the BBC stuff, you know, Late Junction, album compilations. Unpopular music was the fun one, which was a lot of sessions from unpopular artists, as we called them. So kind of looking at more experimental music, and then ambient soundscapes for slow radio on Radio 3. So I kind of worked in those areas mostly. Yeah, next slide, please. I can't see the next slide, but maybe you can.
Oh, it's the OIST
Sorry.
Sonic Lab. Can
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
I can see it now. So yeah, and the reason I'm in Okinawa today is because I'm collaborating with OIST, which is the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology, on a project called Sonic Lab, funded by Japan Science, part of the government. And we're looking at sound and well-being. So how does sound influence well-being? We're doing this in Okinawa because it is known as being one of the places in the world that has a truly incredible population of older people. You know, some of the oldest people in the world are living in Okinawa right now. So we're kind of curious about the landscapes, the soundscapes, and what it is. So Sonic Lab is a kind of ongoing exploration, if you like. And I think the next slide, if you could go to that one, which I think there's some kind of lag because I
don't worry,
can't see
it's
it.
up there, Nick.
Okay, cool. So yeah, just to show you kind of field recordings, we'll be talking about this a little bit in the context of Midori's album as well. But I spend a lot of time, as you can see in these photographs, recording in all kinds of weird and wonderful places here in Japan, from the Nakagin Capsule Tower, which you can see in the middle, to Hokkaido, and here in Okinawa as well. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about sound surveys and field recordings and why that's important to the album. And then I think there's one more slide for me. Yes, so everything kind of comes together through musicity.space, which is the website where all the kind of projects live, and there's a lot of them over the last 15 years. And then the brilliant thing is this project with Midori is the kind of latest iteration. So we're going to go much more into depth, which I'm sure a lot of you will be really eager to kind of hear more about. So yeah, so thanks for the opportunity for the introduction. I'll hand you back to Midori.
So now we'd like to talk a bit more about the project concept and how does Chashitsu turn into a music project. And well, as an avid tea drinker myself, I was naturally drawn to the Chashitsu as an experiential concept, not only for its minimalistic beauty and versatility, but as a space that kind of invites a space for escape to another world. And that sense of reconnection with nature and with your own self. And also it embodies a philosophy of shedding our egos with mutual respect, regardless of any status or background. And Chashitsu is usually described in terms of visual and architectural characters, but much less is said about its sound. And some people might say, well, that's because there's hardly any sound or music in a tea ceremony. But for me, it is full of sonic events and aesthetics. There's so much in the Chashitsu that resonates music. And drawing on the philosophy of the traditional Japanese music, I became fascinated with the idea of attentive listening that can reveal an entirely new sound world. And this is the paradox of silence and ma, the Japanese word that represents both silence and space. What seems silent and empty or void is full of meaning. And through what I call the way of listening, we discover that this void is actually a field of sonic events. John Cage's statement that there is no such thing as silence is well known and was articulated in the Western avant-garde context in the 20th century. Yet this principle itself has long been embedded in Japanese aesthetics. And at its foundation, this project treats sound as kind of like a sonic architecture. And just as physical architecture shapes the way we move, see, and feel the space, music also shapes the way we listen and perceive and experience space. And I feel that architecture is inherently sonic because when we make sound in a built environment, that sound itself is a reflection of the architecture. And listening itself is architectural because it is about how we experience and engage with space. And we're delighted to be presenting this project in the form of an album, which will be released with musicity and a live performance. With my compositions interweaving field recordings taken around different chashitsus by Nick. And the album was selected by PRS Foundation's Women Make Music. And the album version offers something a bit more distilled and intimate, with each track focusing on each element of the journey of experiencing or going into a chashitsu, which we will be going into detail a bit later. And then we have the live performance at the Royal Albert Hall's Elgar Room on the 14th of October, which will be an extension of the album, where we'll be exploring more of the dynamic movement of space in the Elgar Room. It's going to be quite a unique stage setting, different from what you would expect in a conventional concert, at least in a classical sense, where I'll be using speakers and live technology during the performance to transform the space into something that reflects the philosophy and the aesthetics of the chashitsu. And Nick will also be DJing series of ambient music as well.
Yeah, I'll be playing some sort of environmental Japanese music, so it'll be a lot of kind of 80s ambient new age music. But again, definitely thinking about architecture as being one of the reference points for that as well. So yeah, it should be an interesting unusual evening, hopefully.
So now we'd like to share, as the very first public preview of the album, with this video featuring the opening track called Roji, the Chashitsu Garden. So this film was shot at the Chashitsu at Kuraki No Theater in Yokohama. And what I wanted to create in this project is not just a piece of music, but a journey that is carefully designed. And the Roji, the Chashitsu garden that you've just seen in the film, surrounding the Chashitsu, is not simply a walkway. It is a journey of transition, preparing the guests to enter the tea room with a different state of mind. And in the same way, I see this work as guiding the listener through a pathway of sound, gesture, and resonance. And while the Chashitsu and Chadō may appear to be fixed traditions, they have, when looking over history, in fact, continually transformed to reflect the aesthetics of their time. And the more informal chashitsu we recognize today began to take shape rapidly in the 16th century, starting with Take no Jo, who brought tea closer to the everyday world through rustic simplicity. And he left things like bamboo and plain wood unpolished, and shaping that sense of informal beauty. And then Sen no Rikyu refined this into wabi-cha, which later masters such as Oribe, Enshu, and Sowa each reshaped it in their own ways, whether it be the bold asymmetry or more elegance or more refined restraint. And together, these shifts in aesthetics show how the Chashitsu was never static, but a mirror of evolving cultural values. And that sense of shift continues on today. In the same way, architects have interpreted Chashitsu in many different ways as a reflection of modern society. Here we have just 4 examples of these interpretations. Starting with the left, Kengo Kuma's Fuan, which is a structure floated for what he calls Chashitsu as a virtual reality. You can produce every kind of reality there that is completely cut off from the real world. And then we have Koan by Tokujin Yoshioka, made entirely from glass. And for him, the Chashitsu is a device that creates new experiences. And then Shinichiro Hashiguchi's Kasumian is a delicate structure of weaved threads, representing the process of refinement and transformation. And then the Takasugian by Terunobu Fujimori, which literally means tea house built too high. It looks a bit more like a tree house, but for him, he described it as the ultimate personal architecture. And these 4 examples are quite different, but what connects them together is that shared sense of something new and going into another world, which is deeply personal, yet it's still connecting with the world, and it may be something beyond the everyday life. And my idea then, inspired by these modern interpretations, is to interpret this tradition through the medium of sounds. And for me, the Chashitsu feels like a bubble of thought or idea. It is more fluid and open rather than fixed. And that sense of fluidity inspired me to approach the music with imagination and a sense of expansiveness. Nick, did you have anything more to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a question that's just come into my mind about this because I know that we both commented on the Kengo Kuma's Fuon when we both saw it, and I was wondering if that was something that kind of really inspired you from thinking about the tea house in a different way because there's obviously so much tradition involved, and then for Kengo Kuma to create this almost like jellyfish version of a tea house, with kind of using sheeting and everything. Um, was it something that kind of made you think about how you could interpret as well as radically, if you like, as this?
Yes, definitely. And I think, yeah, Kengo Kuma's Fuan was one of the very first Chashitsu that really stuck with me and kept me thinking because, yeah, it is very different, really different. And also the fact that it's more of like an imaginative world where he described it as a virtual reality.
Mm.
And that sense of freedom really inspired me to think that tradition, it's still referring to tradition, but yet we can create a completely new experience and expand our imagination.
Yeah, definitely. I love the fact that the 4 examples here are just are all about that, right? They're sort of like this is what Japan does incredibly well. It understands and it values the tradition, but it tries to kind of drill down a little bit into these areas and just try and figure out, the kind of the essence of it, on a visual level. And then I think, we'll talk more about the album as well, but like your album is doing that on a kind of an audio level. So yeah, this to me is like kind of one of the many things I love about Japan is that sort of really getting deep into these kind of areas.
And yes, then referring to that sense of tradition, but creating something new, for me, the chashitsu is like a metaphor for stage. And during Sen no Rikyu's time, chashitsu represented the pursuit of new experiences. And it was also meant as an experience for learning, of healing, and also heightened awareness, as well as nurturing mutual respect between people. And this comes from this principle called Ichizakonryu, the idea that host and the guest together shape the experience, and that it is your own sense of energy and receptivity that makes the ambience of the space. And in that sense, I think of Chashitsu as a metaphor for a performance stage. Scholar Tatsaburo Hayashiya reminded us that long before Sen no Rikyu's time, the tea room was essentially an entertainment. And he writes that the Chashitsu is itself a stage, the host, both actor and producer, the guests, the audience. And at the heart of the project is this kind of exchange in performance. Music not only moving from performer to listener, but something that circles back as the performer listens to the audience and to the space and to shifting perspectives. And I'd like this project to embody that kind of reciprocity. In the live production, the sounds will be set in motion through the space to explore that sense of shifting perspectives. And uniquely, it will be set in a quadraphonic sound. And what that means is placing 4 speakers at the corners of the space that I will be controlling live as I perform. I will be controlling various motifs that travel around the space through these speakers. In a literal sense, this speaker placement of 4 corners echoes that 4 sides of the traditional tea room. In the surround sound setting, formats such as 5.1 or 7.1, which have more than 5 or 7 speakers, sometimes even more, around the space is more standard. But I deliberately chose quadraphonic and fewer speakers rather than more. With fewer points of projection, I feel that it also creates that sense of space and ma. This space allows the listener to clearly perceive the movement of sound around them and to feel each shift in timbre and direction. And this is also where my broader research of the concept of spatial timbre is incorporated in this composition. So instead of treating timbre or tone colors as a fixed quality of an instrument, I used it as a compositional parameter. So rather than layering many different instruments, I focus on just using one instrument, in this case, the violin, and explore its full spectrum of colors. The idea is to create gradations in sound that move through space and create depth. Perhaps it's a bit like the bokashi technique in woodblock painting, where the gradation of colors create that sense of depth. And when I think about Chashitsu as what we call sonic architecture, I think about how space can be shaped by subtraction rather than addition. And for me, that quadraphonic setup embodies this kind of subtraction. It's kind of a sort of a restraint. It's paring back that leaves room for sounds to breathe. And this idea comes from Toru Takemitsu's theory of river of sounds. Takemitsu described music as something carved out from the endless current of sounds already flowing all around us. In his essay of 1971, he said, "A river of sound, a river teeming with innumerable concrete sounds, endlessly flowing day and night. Each of the sounds that make up this river possesses its own unique life and character. To compose, in my view, is to grasp the sound one should listen to from within this flowing river of sound." So in Japanese aesthetics, in different art forms, there is often that emphasis on subtraction rather than accumulation. And Takemitsu once contrasted this idea with Western music, which he described as being constructed like architectural blocks, sound built dialectically, one piece on top of another to create harmony. And by contrast, Japanese music is about carving away from the myriad of sounds that already exist and allowing what remains to resonate. And in that sense, sonic architecture may be defined as the invisible architecture we inhabit, a space carved from our environment through sound, where timbre builds depth and movement. It is an art of subtraction, of revealing what is already alive in the world around us. And this concept, I think, connects deeply with that philosophy of Chadō. So composing with this philosophy is not the act of building from nothing, but about drawing out what is already there in the environment and listening for what is alive and allowing that energy of sound itself to define the structure, space, and time. And in my own work, I think of each sound as shaping timbre that has its own radiating energy, movement, and character. So to practice sonic architecture is to create a space in which these sounds and silence with their own radiant energies can coexist. So
Midori, maybe
now,
I could
oh, sorry.
just jump in. No, it's cool. It's cool. No, I just wanted to say that when Ruchi Sakamoto played at the Camden Arts Centre a few years ago, I think it's 2018, something like that. I mean, maybe some people here on this here today will have been there as well. But I chatted to him afterwards, and I had been in Aomori recording The Sound of Insects, The Sound of Nature, and I was talking to Ruchi about field recordings, and I knew that he was also kind of at that stage where he was really quite into stripping everything back and really getting into very, very minimal kind of music. And I just said to him, you know, do you ever listen to the sounds of nature sometimes and just think that it's just beautiful as a composition piece in itself, you know, and do you feel sometimes as a musician, as a composer that, you know, why bother when there's just this beautiful soundscape that just exists anyway, you know? And he said that he agreed basically that this, you know, as he's got older, he realized that the sounds of nature, what the ultimate composition, if you like, but it didn't want to stop him trying to be as good as that, which says a lot about him, how kind of humble he, you know, he was, but also it kind of really connects, I think, to this idea of you know, subtraction, but also some of the things you just quoted. So yeah, this is where the field recording aspect and listening plays a big part, and I think that's another part of the whole Japanese maybe compositional, you know, tradition, maybe in some ways. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I just wanted to jump in and say that.
Yes, and the Ryuichi Sakamoto's music really inspired me as well because he incorporates a lot of field recordings in his music, and it's exactly that kind of finding the various motifs already there in the environment. And this is essentially what the album is all about. And as we'll talk about in the next bit, going into the music journey of the composition. A lot of these tracks contain field recordings that were recorded by Nick around various chashitsus in Japan. And my process of composition really started from those field recordings, finding different rhythms or motifs that's already there. And then somehow that all kind of got more and more dynamic or germinated from a very small, something very small. So we'd like to share just a little selection of some of these tracks. And as you can see, so it's a journey of entering the Roji, the Chashitsu garden, all the way to going into the Chashitsu, the tea ceremony, and then finally experiencing darkness with the night lantern. But as you can see, the actual tea ceremony, Chanoyu, number 9, is quite far down in the list. So this kind of shows how much process is significant in this journey, that journey of transition. And so each track is a focus on that each step of the way in the journey. And it's my interpretation of what seemed very interesting to me from a sonic point of view. And when I focus on these points in the step, I found that there were so many things going on in nature that, yeah, I actually had many, many different ideas. And it's just one very small element and my interpretation of it. So I'd like to just share a selection. And the first one, the Roji, is the one that you already heard in the music video. But I just like to play just the first phrase because this is what the first motif is. And this motif then is kind of deconstructed or appears in many different forms and versions throughout the other tracks throughout the journey. So the Roji is the first step in this journey, and it is the first step into going into that another world. And I imagine these sounds calling from that another world that reminded me of the sound of the show, an instrument that symbolizes the sound from heaven. So this first motif appears in many different ways throughout the album. And then once past the Chumon, which is the middle gate that separates the outer garden and the inner garden, we come to more stillness in the environment. And you start to hear more of the natural sounds of the birds. And here, the Rojiskashi is that design of how the leaves filter through the sunlight, leaving a pattern of shadows and light on the ground. And in English, that might be translated as the see-through garden. And here I was really interested in how the birds resonate through the space, and their songs create some overlapping patterns that evolve subtly over time, just as how the patterns of leaves are designed. And this track includes the field recording by Nick as well. So Nick, did you want to talk a little bit about the field recording?
I mean, there's not loads to say. I mean, all the field recordings were taken around different Chashitsus, and that one was late summer. I'm thinking it's a little while ago that I recorded it, but it was early autumn, late summer. Yeah, and it's funny just kind of hearing it because you can feel, the atmosphere. But now I've heard these tracks a lot because we've gone through the whole process of, mastering and listening to different things. Now I can't really disassociate the two things. They seem like so every time I kind of hear that sort of soundscape in my head, I hear the violin, which I think is probably a good thing. It means that it kind of works. So yeah, I mean, all the field recordings were, like I said, it wasn't one place that they were from. It was all kind of different Chashitsus. But yeah, that's it. But it's lovely for me personally to kind of to kind of feel that kind of it's komorebi, right? Is that the kind of the term you were thinking of? The light comes through the trees. Yeah. I mean, I love that word.
Exactly.
It's a
Yeah,
beautiful,
komorebi. Yeah.
beautiful word as well, komorebi. But I can kind of feel that now listening to it.
So then we have after the visitor experiences the step of purification, where you go to the tsukubai, the water basin, to cleanse the hands. Then you come to finally in front of the Chashitsu, where you will see the small square entrance called Nijiriguchi. And this word, Nijiriguchi, comes from the verb nijiru, which is to kneel and move forward slowly. And everyone entering the Chashitsu must kneel down to enter. And this is a ritual that strips away our ego and reminds us that all inside are equal. And personally, when I kneel, hands on the tatami, I feel grounded and more connected to the earth. And it reminded me of that physical movement of my violin bow going on the string, which has energy that flows back and forth, and that sense of awakening of spirit. So I was inspired by this physical movement that creates a rhythmic motif that carries out throughout this movement. And in contrast to this, I was also inspired to write a melody that is reminiscent of the instrument hichiriki in gagaku, which is an instrument that symbolizes the voices reverberating through the earth. And now finally, we come inside the Chashitsu. And once inside the Chashitsu, it is a very small space, usually the size of 4.5 tatami mats. And even though it is small, once you sit inside, it somehow feels expansive. And objects are usually placed asymmetrically, creating a subtle sense of ma. And here I imagined the sounds kind of bouncing off the four sides and also the silence weaving. So this movement is also about that shift between the tangible room and the personal imagined room. So then the tea ceremony is being prepared, and we come to the ro, the fireplace, which is in a sunken hearth that you see here. And the sounds come alive here with the sparkling sounds. It's more crackling sound that becomes part of the experience as the host prepares for the tea ceremony. And this is quite a playful track. And I imagined to try and draw out that kind of play of the sparkling sounds and the movement of the flame. And then finally, we come to the actual tea ceremony, chanoyu. This is a very quiet space where silence carries a meaning and the gestures are very significant. And Nick recorded this entire tea ceremony in Chashitsu in Tokyo. And each motif echoes that meaningful gesture. So the field recording is quite quiet there, but is some moments in this as you listen further to the track that yeah, there are more things going on. And Nick, did you want to say something about the experience of recording the tea ceremony?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, a lot of it was really quiet, but I mean, I think every single element was important, right? So obviously, it's a physical thing and visual, but also there were just moments I remember where, even the pulling of the sort of kimono or whatever just became really, really significant as a sound, just kind of capturing the material sound in the space, or just the movement on the tatami. So yeah, all these kind of little hidden moments felt to me to be really, really important at that moment. And I mean, in a way, it's a question. I don't know if every single aspect of that is key to this, but it did strike me that it is a performance in itself. And I think maybe people don't often think about the sonic side of that. They think about the visual side of the tea ceremony, but actually, maybe the sound of it as well is really important. Um, yeah, I mean, is that your experience as well, Midori, that maybe there's a sonic side to it?
Yes, I think there is that definitely a sense of tension, awareness,
Hmm.
like yeah, heightened awareness that makes you discover more things, I feel. And it's because of that
Yeah.
silence and the sense of ma that makes me realize, oh, there's a sound here or this gesture And yeah, you question the meaning of it as well, which is the
Yeah,
same through how I interpret through sounds.
yeah, that's it, isn't it? And I think just going back to the previous track, the Road, just very quickly, what's interesting, because that was a fire sound, but first time I just heard this, through Zoom for the first time. But what I love about it, like you said, it's quite playful. It feels like your violin's on fire and you're quickly trying to play it before it kind of becomes like burn away. I kind of thought that was quite interesting, and I'm sure that was not the intention, but that's just an interesting thought that I had listening to it just then. So yeah, so it's kind of funny how these worlds kind of merge, right? When you just listen, I think it's you get these different images in your head, which is also relevant to the way that Kango Kuma, for example, designed the Fuan, or other people working on the visual design. It's like it kind of tells a different story, which I think is fun as well.
Yes, and it's always great to hear different interpretations. And just like how you
Yeah.
told me how you saw it through that fire, yeah, I'm really excited to hear other people's interpretations, which must be completely different from mine as well, but that's great.
Mm.
So yes, and next one, I think as we're pressing on time, the album, the final track in the journey is Andon, the Paper Lantern, and this is really about the appreciation of shadows. As Senoriku said, let the shadows play. Um, and as a conclusion, so looking closely at Chashitsu, we see how the design and the philosophy mirror the values of attentive listening, of mindfulness, peace, and connection with nature. And I hope that through our project, the music strives to do the same. And we hope that this project is only the beginning. This time we produce an album and live performance, but it could be in any other format. And we're open to other people's thoughts and questions that anybody might have. And we hope that this opens a dialogue. And finally, last but not least. Um, so the album will be released on Musicity on 10th of October. And here is the first look at the preview at the album cover. We're very excited that Tony Giddings, a British designer, has illustrated a special cover for us. This is her interpretation of Chashitsu through my music. So this is really exciting for me that here we have another visual interpretation of the Chashitsu, which is a very kind of evocative of imaginative and a modern Chashitsu. And then we have the live performance on the 14th of October, Royal Albert Hall. And in fact, the tickets have just gone out on sale today. So if anybody is interested, please come along. And through this QR code here, you could access the Royal Albert Hall's website. And thank you so much for listening. And we're open to any thoughts or questions that you might have.